Welcome once again, everyone, to Mary's School of Prophecy. I'm your host, William Tapley, also known as the Third Eagle of the Apocalypse and the co-prophet of these end times. And I have another extremely interesting video about Dana Coverstone's most recent dream, which he called Shutting Down the Machine's Dream. And as you'll see, I have a personal interest in this dream. In fact, I think it has a direct effect on me, and it's very similar to, I think, the dream. You remember where you had that dream where there was a refuge, and the refugees came to a T in the road? Well, I'm sure the T refers to my refuge, and I mentioned it at the time. And then the refugees, they went off into a field of corn. That sure sounds like Iowa to me. In any event, I think we'll find that this dream is also significant for my ministry. And the machine, I'm going to give you people a quiz, all of you, my WFRN members. What does the machine represent in Dana's dream? I hope some of you, hopefully all of you, have watched Dana's program. Also, by the way, I hope the sound is going right. I should look at the chat and make sure everybody is, well, I don't see anybody complaining, so you must be able to hear me. And I'm going to suggest in this video that the machine that Dana saw in his dream is a specific reference to one of the evil entities of these end times. And Sherry Goff, I never understood that. But there are, and I was going through the list of the evil entities of these end times, one of which is represented by this machine. For example, we have the false prophet, we have the Antichrist, we have the harlot, the whore of Babylon, we have the scarlet beast that she rides. Now those are all in the book of Revelation. In Daniel, we have the lioness, the bear, and the leopard. In Daniel 7, going back to the book of Revelation, we have the angel of the abyss. I think that's right. The angel that has the key to the abyss and unleashes a plague of locusts, obviously an evil entity. We have, of course, the black horse, the red horse, the white horse, and the pale horse. Not in that order, but that's all out of the book of Revelation. We have the statue of Nebuchadnezzar in Daniel 4. No. Is it Daniel 1? And in Daniel 2, we have the statue with the gold head and the silver chest and the belly of bronze and the legs of iron and the feet of iron and clay. Iron and tin, actually. In Daniel 7, we have the prince who shall come, who destroys the city and the sanctuary. Some people think that's the Antichrist, but it's not. We have wormwood, which is another term for the false prophet. In Daniel 8, we have the goat, which represents Russia, and we have the ram, which represents Britain and America. And actually, they are evil. They are destroyed, both of them. So I would have to say that they represent evil forces. So anyway, of all those evil entities that I just mentioned, one of them is symbolized by this machine in Daniel's dream. So I want you to, as I read this dream over, I want you to listen carefully and see if you can determine which one. This gives you a gold star for this class in Mary's School of Prophecy. Now, Dana had this dream over 4 nights, and I think we can get right in it. Let me see. How many people do we have watching? I guess we have 36 people. If there's students who are late, I rang the bell, and it's up to them to get here on time, so to speak. Now, as you know, I'm the engineer of this program and the host, so if things don't go quite as smoothly as they are supposed to go, let's blame the engineer, because he's not exactly operating behind the scenes, but I don't want to take all the blame. So let's look at the first slide I've got here. Starting out, Dana Coverstone's newest dream. Am I ready to do this? I guess so. Let me just check and see if everybody's got the sound okay. Oh, Sam is here. Great, Sam. I was going to call you up and I was rushing to get this program ready. Okay, well, we're glad you're here, Sam. And I can mention that, of course, after this program at 8 p.m. Eastern, Sam will do a live stream rosary on D-Live. Okay, now, without further ado, let's look at the first slide I've got here. This is Dana Coverstone's newest dream. The dream began with a heavy-duty machine spinning in a circle. I didn't read the title, Shutting Down the Machine's Dream. And he received this March 9th through the 12th. And, of course, 4 is a very significant end times number. It was like a very large, in what seemed to be a huge commercial building. It was like a very large bicycle tire with spokes that were spinning very fast and was solidly built. This was commercial quality, heavy-duty equipment. The equipment was menacingly large and hooked to a chimney that was blowing thick black smoke into the sky above the building. Now, of all the evil entities that I mentioned at the start of the program, only one of them is manufactured. So there is a clue I'm going to give you for you to determine if you can tell me which of those evil entities this machine represents. Now, Sherry Goff, she did got some things right. She interpreted Dana's dream as usual, but she did not understand who which entity, evil entity, this machine represents. Now, the black smoke pouring out of this machine indicates evil, black. That's why it's black. I would say it represents lies. And, for example, like the New York Times, disinformation. And, in fact, I first thought that this machine represented the media. That was my interpretation. And if you remember Dana's dream about the jets, 2022 jets, the sky turns black in September. I think all of his recent dreams are related. Okay, let's look at the next slide. Just a minute. I've got to get it lined up here. The smoke was churning over the United States, almost as if it were alive. It looked as if it was moving, like it was breathing and moving and pulsing. The machine was spinning at a very high rate of speed and had sparks of electricity and small flames coming off of it at various times. It was humming loudly, and it sounded like a jet engine. Have you ever been in a jet when they pulled on the runway, when they get ready to take off and they start to wind those engines up? That's what it sounded like the entire time. Like when you're on a runway and the pilot picks up speed to take off. Well, that's a good description of this machine. I've been in a jet. I know exactly what that means. That's when you get excited. When you're at the end of the runway and you hear the engine rev up like that, you know the most critical part of the flight is about to occur. After the jet gets off the ground, you can relax. Now, notice he says that he's looking down over the United States. And just like I would say on all the dreams that I can remember, his dreams are primarily warnings to the United States. And this is no exception. Okay, let me get the next slide. I then saw a person with a big axe who was running towards that machine and tried to strike the circle at the bottom, in the middle, that was spinning, and he was immediately thrown about 20 feet back, and the axe in his hand was thrown even further. Then from the other side of the wheel that was spinning, a woman came, and she ran towards the machine in the same way with the same kind of axe, and she struck that thing right at the very middle at the bottom, and she too was thrown back, and the axe was thrown out of her hands. So now, this is kind of interesting. We have a man attacking the machine on one side, a woman attacking the machine on the other. So here's my second quiz for you. Who do the man and woman, who does the man and woman, who do they represent? That's the second part. That's the next question for you as I read this dream. Who do they represent? I think they represent real people. At first, I thought that they represented Dana Coverstone and Amanda Freitas, because they both received very significant dreams, which are intertwined. And it's possible they represent more than one couple. As you go through this, you'll see, though, that the people I think they represent fit the prediction better. Another thing is that mankind is represented by a man and a woman in Bible prophecy. The number 2 over 3, for example, when you put man over God, 2 for mankind, a man and a woman. 3 represents the divine Trinity. When you put man over God, you get the fraction 2/3, which signifies 0.666, as you know. And notice also, when you're trying to figure out what this machine represents, it has 2 sides. The woman comes from one side, the man from the other side. And he emphasizes that quite often, the dual side nature of this machine. That's another clue as to what evil entity this machine represents. Okay, let's move on to the next slide. Now, both the man and the woman were left groaning on the ground and moving like they'd been in a car wreck. They were like trying to get up and holding their hips and their arms and legs and just looking at their head and things like that. So like they've been beat up when they got knocked back from the machine. And then the man I see so often walked right up to the spinning machine. And while the spinning continued, it didn't stop, but he spoke and he said, "You have to work together, as I have told you before. You need more people to attack what is producing the darkness." So here's another clue. There are 2 characteristics that prevent the man and the woman from defeating the machine. First, they don't work together. And secondly, they don't have enough people. And I was going to say something else. I guess that's the comment I wanted to make. And, the man. Who the man represents. In Dana's dreams, the man in white represents most likely Jesus. And I think that's who it represents in this case. It certainly represents the divinity. Sometimes he seems to think the Holy Spirit. I think Sherry Goff has said the Holy Spirit. Or just say God Almighty. That's who the man in white represents. Anyway, the man in white is the one who tells them why they are failing in their efforts against the machine. Okay, let's look at the next slide. And the scene then changed, and I was looking down on the United States and watching the smoke begin to churn even faster with tornado-like winds that were pounding the surface. This thing was moving and churning. If there was ever a picture of what they say global warming is, it would have to have been it in that sense. And I'm not a big believer in global warming. The point is, it was chaotic. It was awful. It was evil. It was ugly. Well, let me tell you, Dana, I don't believe in global warming either. In fact, I heard one of them say that the global cooling, we were in a cold spell, and they said, well, global cooling is caused by global warming. So that shows you how much that is. But global warming is symbolic in people's minds. And I think that's why Dana mentioned it. Global warming is an idea that man is messing with nature and upsetting the natural balance of things. It's like an affront by mankind against God's creation. And I think that is a good description. And when I tell you what this machine represents, I think you'll see that is a good description, a good representation or symbology for this machine, that it is an affront, something manufactured by mankind, which is an affront against God, which would be similar to global warming. Okay, let's look at the next slide. I then saw some small fires that were starting in the Midwest, and some were stronger than others, and some were weaker and went out. But some of those fires that I saw in the middle of the United States, and I saw fires in the West Coast and East Coast too, but the ones I saw in the Midwest began to burn through the clouds. They got brighter, and the stronger those fires got, it began to push through the dark, thick smoke, and it seemed like to burn a hole through it. And then the flame was above the cloud. And then suddenly the fire would start burning above the smoke and push it away from the area where the fire was. Well, isn't that kind of interesting that Dana sees this fire starting in the Midwest? You can see why I immediately felt an affinity with this dream of his. I think that I would not be surprised if at least one of these fires is our own ministry right here in Iowa. And there are others in this area. Well, Sister Renee has a ministry. Keith Nestor has a ministry. All in Iowa. There's another one in Iowa, too. And I don't know if she's still doing the rosary or not. But I think, so far, I think my ministry would qualify. I'm serious. I think this is true. Okay, so now let's look at the next slide. Let me see. Here we are. In different places around the nation, the fire was burning through the smoke, reaching above it and dissipating that smoke, and literally pushing it back. It looked like hands. The fire was red hot. It had blue flames shooting out from the center, and they were growing and getting larger in the ground. And the flames at times literally looked like hands that were pushing back the smoke and pushing and holding back those dark clouds. And those fires were breaking out then at this time all over the nation. It wasn't the entire nation that was covered, but there were fires breaking out mostly in the Midwest and larger areas on the coast, the larger cities. So now that's the third time Dana Coverstone has mentioned the Midwest. And I think this is very significant. I don't think he's actually referring to his own ministry. He's in Kentucky, which would not be the Midwest. Now, the color blue represents Mary and, by extension, her rosary. And, of course, that's a primary part of my ministry. Now, Sherry Goff said it represented the Holy Spirit, and there are not too many places in the Bible where the color blue is found, so I'm not going to disagree with that. Though, of course, Mary is the spouse of the Holy Spirit, so there would be a relationship there. Now, the smoke, the blue flame or blue smoke, which is it? Let me take a look and see. Is it the blue smoke or the blue flame? Oh, yeah, the blue flame. Okay, the blue flame, she said, Dana says, look like hands. Well, I think that's a reference to the rosary. There are 10 decades 10 Hail Marys in a decade. And, of course, 5 and 5, as you know, 5 and 5 is the number that defeats 6 and 6. 555 defeats 666. And now Sherry Goff did make a correct interpretation of the hand. She says that the hand, this would represent unity. In other words, the 5 fingers, although individuals, are part of the hand. And that would indicate that the people have taken Dana's, the Man of White's advice and joined together. That's what the hands, I think, represent. I think it represents both Mary's rosary and the unity, which evidently the groups that are fighting against the machine have now taken into consideration. That's why the fires are breaking out. They've learned how to be unified. Okay, let's look at the next slide. I was then back in the warehouse that was now filled with people who were all holding axes, and they were also all staring at the circle in the center. and moving slowly and methodically toward it on both sides. It was hundreds and hundreds of people, and they had axes in their hands, and they were taking one step at a time. Their focus and their faith was completely on what they were walking towards, which was at the center of the bottom of that spinning circle. So like before, when the man and the woman came at the circle, the spinning bicycle wheel or machine, from two different sides, this group is now on both sides. But now there's hundreds and hundreds of people. So we've satisfied the second requirement of the man in white. In other words, there are many more people. And certainly that's many more people than I have in my ministry, for example. So my ministry may not be the one. We'll see. We'll see what eventually, of course, I will know. Now, Sherry Goff did make an interesting observation here. In fact, I don't think I saw this when I saw it the first time. She says that all the people, the hundreds of people, are concentrating on the machine. They are all looking at the machine. They are not looking at each other. In other words, the unity comes from not looking at each other's faults, for example, but looking at the enemy. We have a common enemy. And I think that is how our Marian ministries are going to succeed, through unity and through an increase in number, just like the man in white says. Okay, let's look at the next slide. Let me see here. I have to kind of get organized here. Oh, here we go. They get slowly, methodically walking towards it. They stopped about 5 feet from it on both sides, and they raised their axes, and they cried out with one word. And when they cried out that word, it was the word now. But they said it like this, now. And it came out loud and boisterous, so everybody could hear it with a loud voice. At the same time they cried out now, the man that I always see was standing behind that group of people, and he mouthed the word at the same time. He mouthed that same word now as they were shouting now. It gave me one of those "we're standing at the walls of Jericho" pictures in my head. So, we've got another set of 5s, don't we? On one side, they are 5 feet away. On the other side, they're 5 feet away. That's not accidental. So we've got 4 5s now. The hands with the 5 fingers on each hand. And each group is 5 feet away on the 2 sides. Once again, notice we've got both sides mentioned. So, what would the 4 5s represent? Well, that represents the 5 mysteries of the Rosary: the joyful, the sorrowful, the luminous, and the glorious. Now, of course, Dana and Sherry Goff, they don't understand any of that. But if they understood biblical numerology, especially, and that 555 defeats 666, those things would stand out in their minds. And, of course, the both sides, as I say, that's one of the keys to understanding what this machine represents. Have any of you figured out? Now, I'm not checking out the chat, so maybe some of you have figured out which evil entity in the Bible does this machine represent. The 2 sides as a key to understanding. Okay, let me look at the next slide. And from each side, with axes raised, they stormed the spinning wheel, and they each struck the foundation with their axes, and they didn't pull the axe away. They left it there, stuck deep at the root of that situation. It was a loud screech as the axes bit into the machine, and it stopped spinning. The power was still trying to spin, but the people held their axes in place, and you could see the strain. They strained and they strained against the power of the machine, but they held their ground, and a sickening sound began to pulse through the building where it was housed. So the whole building began to pulsate. So, once again, we see that term on each side there's two sides. So are you close to figuring out what evil entity? As I said, only one of those evil entities I mentioned before is manufactured. Okay, let's look at the next slide. Everything was shaking. Even in the dream, it appeared as if the floor was shaking because they were stopping the pressure of this machine that was going. The people holding their positions were bloodied, and they were sweating and obviously strained, but they stayed in place. And they encouraged each other to stand strong. And I heard them quote together Psalm 144, verse 1. They were shouting this: "Blessed be the Lord, my rock, who trains my hand for war and my fingers for battle." They were shouting that together, chanting it almost. Another interesting reference to fingers. I don't think that's accidental. Now, what does Psalm 144 refer to? That's kind of interesting. Now, in the Douay-Rheims Bible, by the way, the numbering is different. It's Psalm 143. Well, Sherry Goff did not mention this. I think she should have. Psalm 144 is about David taking on Goliath. In fact, there is not a footnote, but a pre-note, whatever you call it. There's a little note before the chapter in my Douay-Rheims Bible. And I don't think the King James has that, but that's what it refers to. This is blessed be the Lord, my rock, who trains my hands for war and my fingers for battle. This is a reference to David defeating Goliath. And if you follow my rosary at all in the morning, you know that David chooses 5 smooth pebbles against Goliath. That's not accidental. He only needed one. The 5 smooth pebbles, that's rosary imagery. Well, I've got my rosary here. Where's my rosary? Well, it's behind the computer. The 5 smooth pebbles, that references the rosary. And it connects with the 2 hands of the blue fire. And David against Goliath, all Bible scholars will tell you that prefigures Jesus taking on the Antichrist. And as we know, Jesus is the commander-in-chief in this battle, but Mary is the 5-star general. That's why David chose 5 smooth pebbles, that represents the rosary, and the shepherd's sling that he has represents Mary's scapular. Those are the 2 weapons that we use against the forces of the Antichrist. In fact, I think that's one of the reasons for the 2 sides, is to represent the 2 sides that we attack and the 2 weapons that we use. And it's possible, for example, the man, there's more than one meaning here. It's possible that the man represents the rosary, in other words, the aggressive side of the equation, the, what would you call it? The offensive weapon, and the woman would represent the defensive weapon. In other words, the scapular, the scapular. All right, let's look at the next slide. I expect somebody to figure out what this machine represents. Okay, we're up to next to the last slide, people. And the machine began to whine louder and began to shake, and still the people held their position, though it was fighting against them. And finally, this large piece at the top of the circle shattered, and the machine stopped all movement and vibrations, and it began to smoke, and the factory began to shut down. All the doors were open to the outside of the building, and the people walked out with their axes, but they were being led by the man who led them out. So it's interesting that at the top, even though they are striking the machine at the bottom, at the base, it breaks at the top. I think that's significant, as we'll see when we find out what this machine represents. Now, this group that is taking on the machine that is successful is being led by the man in white. And it takes a group, a large group, hundreds of people, according to Dana's dream, and the people are led by Jesus, and I think that's another clue to what this machine represents. Okay, this is the last slide, everyone. Your final chance to get bonus points in Mary's School of Prophecy today. As they got outside, the man pointed to the distance, and he said, "You won't stop all the evil, but together you can take down more of it." Focused prayer and unity is more important now in America than ever before. It's up to you, so find the motivation. It's up to you, so find the motivation and strike at the root together. Remember that evil will fight back. And I am with you and in you, and greater in you than you know. He then pointed again at a city in the distance. You could see the lights, and you could see darkness. And he said, "Strike together and aim for the root." Oh, let me see here. Here we are. Okay, so that is the end of the dream. Fascinating dream. And I don't know if I can see it. If people raise your hands if you know who or what the machine represents. Did anybody say here? Carolyn says the machine is probably the deep state. That's pretty good. I was looking, where is the deep state, though, in the Bible? I'm saying that it represents a specific entity in end times Bible prophecy. But I think that's, I will certainly give you partial credit for that, Carolyn. Let's see. Carolyn says, or it could mean the church militant. That would be the group that defeats the... Bob D says the man in white is Jesus. His other dream where our Lord was telling his mother in the building how to proceed. I think so. I think you're right. I think if we say it's Jesus, I think that we've got it. Carolyn says, I think it means that Catholics and Protestants must work together. There are not enough Catholics to go it alone. He mentions Catholics. Dana Coverstone does. And, of course, he's Protestant, and I'm Catholic. So I think that's right. Maybe we can get Dana Coverstone to move out to Iowa. What does that sound like? Let's see. Carolyn says, is that spinning machine the Vatican? Blowing black smoke out of it reminds me of Pope Francis becoming Pope. Well, that's a good commentary, Carolyn. I think you're very close. That's very close. Dale says the pound of picture perfect. Okay, that's very good. Thank you for that. Okay, so now I am going to tell you what the machine symbolizes in Bible prophecy, and that is it stands for the statue in Daniel 2. The statue that Nebuchadnezzar dreams about, the statue with a gold head, silver chest, bronze thighs, 2 legs, notice 2 legs of iron, and the 2 feet. As far as I can think, the statue of Nebuchadnezzar, of the gold, the feet with made of iron and clay, as far as I can think of, that's the only entity of all the ones I mentioned that is created by mankind. It's the only entity it can represent. So the 2 sides, which Dana mentions many times, represents the 2 feet of iron and tin. And then there was a group that was successful against the machine. It struck it at the root. Remember, the remnant group that strikes the statue strikes it at the base. And just like they do with this machine in Dana's dream. And I've said all along that is the remnant Catholic Church that strikes at the base of the statue. It is cut out of the mountain. The mountain is the Roman Catholic Church. The remnant church grows and becomes a great mountain itself. The small stone, the remnant Catholic Church, is cut without hands. That's a reference to Jesus. He is, in other words, he's leading the group, just like he's leading the group in Dana's dream. And by the way, don't listen to the false prophets who say that the stone is Jesus. The stone that smashes the feet of iron and tin is not Jesus. It's the remnant Catholic Church. Jesus is the stone cutter. He forms the stone, just like the man in white leads the group against the machine. Okay, so now I think I've got that pretty right. I mean, I admit I've been thinking about it for 3 or 4 days, so if you didn't get it right away, don't worry. I did not think of it right away either. And now how about the man and the woman? Does anybody got any ideas on who the man and the woman represent? Oh, Sam is here. He says, I am here. Thank you for asking. Much better. I can explain later. It's probably muscular because I swept lots of leaves and branches off of my roof yesterday. Oh, that could be. You could have pleurisy also. That's where the membrane between the lung and the chest and the ribs is inflamed. Well, that's good news because you can get over that pretty easily. Okay, how about the man and the woman? Come on, people. Who do the man and woman represent? Now, I've given you a lot of clues during this program on who the man and the woman represent. I have, in fact, mentioned both by name. Just so that you would figure it out. Come on, people. Who do the man and woman represent? First of all, they don't get along. Did you notice that? They don't strike the machine together. And Dana specifically says they need unity. Now, who does that tell you? Who are they? Who's the man and the woman? Number 2, their ministries are way too small. They don't have enough people. Now, that should tell you who. I'll give you another clue. They're located in the Midwest. I can't spell it out for you much more. Who are the man and woman in Dana's dream? Well, I think I'll let you think about that. What else have we got here on the chat? I like to teach my class a little bit. I probably shouldn't do that. A good teacher doesn't do that because the students are always in anticipation. I should tell you right now who the man and the woman represent. But this is not a real school, and I'm not grading anybody. Bob D says, I think this week is one for us in history. 23 children taken. I'm not sure what you're talking about there. 23 is a number for the Antichrist. And supposedly 6 nuclear weapons going through Glasgow. That's not the nuclear weapons I worry about. You know the nuclear weapons I worry about? The ones that are in Turkey. Why in the world we ever gave Turkey nuclear weapons is beyond me. Can you imagine that? What stupid administration put American nukes in Turkey? I mean, if we have nuclear war, it's the politicians that got us here in the first place. They deserve all the credit. Bob D says, it's hurtful when I see people taking the Eucharist in their hands. And then the bishops wonder why only, 45% of the, or is it less than that, 45% of Catholics believe in the real presence? Here they degrade the Eucharist for years and years and years, and then they wonder why there's no real belief in the real presence. They take the Eucharist away from the tabernacle, put it off on a side altar. So I agree with you, Bob D. Tony Garcia says that there's pray for people in Texas because they're going to have a lot of severe weather. Now, this is the time for severe weather out here in the Midwest and in Texas. JMJ agrees with Bob. Adam and Nancy K are here. Adam and Nancy, who are the 2 people now? Who's the man and the woman that are not cooperating? and their ministries are both tiny. And if they got together, they could defeat this. Oh, by the way, the statue. I didn't tell you what the statue represents, the feet. And I've mentioned this many times. In Carolyn Couch, it's very close. The iron, the feet of iron represents the one world government. So I think Carolyn mentioned that, the deep state. That would be the same thing. The feet of tin, which everybody calls clay, the feet of clay, represents the one world religion. So when Carolyn says the Vatican, so I think you got it, Carolyn. You got the feet of iron and the feet of clay, and they don't mix. That's why we have separation of church and state. That's why that's an expression of the end times relationship between the one world government and the one world religion. Well, let's see. Sayako is here. Hi, Sayako. Hi all, God bless to all, love everyone as we are children of God. Carolyn Couch says, I hope Sam is okay. And then Sam commented, so that's good. Jerry G says, I was at a traditional Latin Mass this morning and missed the rosary with you. Thank you for letting me know. He is in my prayers. Yeah, Sam, if you want to call in, I've got my phone here. If you want to call in, let people know. Tina Sislow says, afternoon. Tina says to like and share. April Gardner is here. April, I don't think I ever hear you on the... April is a very erudite member of our family, but she hardly ever comments. And she's been a supporter for a long time. And I always enjoy her comments, but she has a job, full-time job, so she doesn't comment on the rosary. I'm not even sure if April's a Catholic or not, to tell you the truth. That shows you how disorganized my ministry is. Okay. By the way, has anybody figured out who the man and the woman are? Carolyn Count says, you and Sister Renee, ha ha ha. You are 100% right, Carolyn. I believe the man and the woman who fail at bringing down the statue and the machine represents me and Sister Renee. That's the only one I mean, it took me a while to think of that up, but I said, who else are not cooperating? That's Sister Renee and me. Who else are in the Midwest? Who else have very small ministries? I really do think that that's who Dana is talking about. Did anybody else say, oh yes, Rosary WMD says Sister Renee and you? I think so. I agree, Kyle. And I think that anybody got any suggestions on how we're going to rectify the situation? First of all, how Sister Renee and I are going to get our ministries in order. And secondly, how we're going to grow our ministries. Dana says that the deep state and the one world religion, it's up to us. I mean, it's not just up to us. There are other lights, he says, mostly in the Midwest, but some on the East Coast and on the West Coast. And I know at one time I thought that all of you who are interested should come out here to Osage and we'd have one big happy family. But I know when St. Therese told me to sell my other house, I said, no, I guess I was mistaken on that. In fact, Sister Renee and I both thought that we would have like a convent for the women who wanted to join her order. I mean, that was our original. I came out here to Osage mainly because Sister Renee and her group was such a big supporter of mine. So I think we still have a destiny to work together on this. But we have to take Dana's advice. We have to look at the enemy and not at each other's faults. I really think Sherry Goff got that right. All the people who are successful in defeating the statue of Nebuchadnezzar, the machine, the one world government, the one world religion, they focus on the enemy. They don't focus on each other. So that's a key. That's a very good advice that I think we have to take. Okay. I think that's. Carolyn says, "No way. I would never believe that for a second." You mean the suggestion that the man and the woman are me and Sister Renee? You were the one that made the suggestion. I think you're right. JMJ says Dana and that lady. I thought it was originally Dana Coverstone and Amanda Freitas, but that doesn't quite fit. First of all, they're not against each other. They're in separate parts of the world. Let's see. Dana's in Kentucky. Amanda's in Philadelphia, I think she said, or near Philadelphia. Whereas Sister Renee and I are, just a few miles away from each other. Adam and Nancy says Protestants and Catholics. Dana mentioned Catholics. He said Catholics and Protestants have to work together. And there's more than one interpretation, I'm sure. I'm sure that there's probably another interpretation for the statue, or and the machine, which I say is the statue. And I've given my reasons, so I think that's the end of the program. I don't like to go over too long. 1 hour from now, Sam Fisher will be doing a live stream. On D-Live, he will be praying the rosary, so Bob D says, William, do you think Europe will fall before us? I think so, yes. That's my opinion. Okay, everybody. Let's see. Karen says, don't worry, Mr. Tapley. Holy Mary will intervene personally along with St. Therese. It will take some years yet. It better take shorter time than that. We don't have that much time. We don't have several years. I'm hoping it's much sooner than that. But thanks, Karen Herrera. That's what it has to be. Fake person says, Mr. T, so every church around me only does it on the hand. And so do I get on the hand or not at all? And we'll get all 5 Saturdays. Yeah, you do need to do all 5 first Saturdays if you've never done it, starting in April. We have 5 months when the skies are clear, according to the date of Coverstone. And the 5 first Saturdays, that's ideal time to get it done. Okay, everybody. Adam and Nancy say, awesome Decode, Mr. T. Thanks, Adam and Nancy. I appreciate it. I thought it was kind of an interesting interpretation. And I haven't, until somebody convinces me otherwise, I think I've got it right. So, but maybe I don't. And I'm sure there's more. Oh, by the way, my brother had an amazing dream last night, and he called me about it. I'm going to have to do a program on his dream, which is also prophetic. Okay, everybody. I'll see you all tomorrow. Don't forget Sam Fisher in about an hour from now. Live stream Rosary on DLive. And then I will be back tomorrow. Same time, same station. So until I do see all of you again, may God bless all of you. And may all of you have a very blessed